Okay, welcome back, everybody. We are here because the presentation, please. Because we are here because we have a very interesting speech, I think, now about agroecological issues. So, and in this case, agroecological urbanism. That is a very interesting topic in the agroecological world. And we have Chiara Tornaghi. But why Chiara Tornaghi and why this topic? Because we, as a research group, since year are working on agroecology and agroecological issues. And I don't know if you know that Professor De Marchi, for example, is a professor of agroecology and territorial management. I think that some of you could, if you want, you can join this course in the next semester. And we focus, and the course is focused a lot on the sides of agroecology. That is science, movement, and practices, on movement and practices. That I think that it is are two fields of agroecology that usually are not touched, at least in agroecologic in the agro department on the other area of Padua University. So I think it's very interesting. And because we think about agroecology as one of the alternatives to fossil fuel extraction, for example. So what we can do in areas where, in extractive areas, to give an alternative to people living there and working on extractive, on the oil extraction, on the mineral extraction, maybe agroecology could be a sustainable alternative. And moreover, we also published some papers, an article about agroecology. And there is also Francesco Facchinelli, you remember, his thesis, his PhD thesis is on the investigation of agroecological alternatives in extractive areas in Ecuador. So this is a very key line of investigation for our research group. And one of the inspiration for our work is Chiara Tornaghi. And so we invited her here. So now I leave the floor to Francesca that briefly present Chiara Tornaghi, who is here. And then we leave the floor to Chiara, of course, to present her speech, and then like 20 minutes, half an hour of questions. So, okay, thank you very much, and please, Francesca.
So good morning, everybody. Good morning, Chiara. And a very quick presentation. So Chiara Tornaghi is Associate Professor in Urban Food Sovereignty and Resilience at the Center of Agroecology, Water and Resilience at the Coventry University in UK. She holds a PhD in applied sociology, a degree in political science, and a postgraduate certificate in European spatial planning. And then after working in different universities around Europe, Italy, Austria, and also in UK, she stopped at Coventry University since 2015. She defines her as a scholar activist. Her work is an intersection between agroecological farmers movement, urban food justice and sovereignty movement, urban and peri-urban agriculture, political pedagogies for urban agroecology, feminist social reproduction, and medicinal agroecological practices. And today she is going to introduce us to agroecological urbanism. That is a promising model addressing different challenges as climate change, soil regeneration, resource conservation, and sustainable farming, while developing sustainable and socially just urban habits and livelihoods. So thank you, Chiara, to be here with us today. I give you the floor, and thank you.
Thank you, Francesca and Daniele, and thank you everyone for inviting me today. Um, and also thank you for this introduction. So you covered a lot of my background. So I've organized this lecture, this presentation around 3 parts. So the first one gives a brief introduction of what we are talking about and what we are not, and definitions of agroecology and agroecological urbanism. And then I will go quickly on a bit of a background and why we need an agroecological urbanism urgently. And the third part is where I'm going to explain the value system and the building blocks of and on how we can build an agroecological urbanism today. So I want to start with this slide. Usually this would be a presentation of its own. I've been working for many years on urban agriculture. So that was when I really came into food. So from the back doors, I was interested in how cities would design public space, how people would reclaim that space, how they would express their needs in the city. And that's how I realized that there was a movement for urban agriculture. And this paper that you can see on the left here was published in Antipode in 2016, was a moment where, let's say, my research in urban agriculture ends and my work around agroecology properly starts. But I want to present this slide because you will see here a graph that illustrates different types of justice. And these were the forms of injustice that were reproduced through urban agriculture. And why I thought we really need to work around how to enable people to overcome these forms of injustice and how, and I thought that the philosophy and the principles of agroecology and then the trajectory for an agroecological urbanism would be the way through which we could overcome them. I just mentioned them briefly because this will emerge in the next slides and in the trajectory that I will explain you. So the first form of injustice was environmental. So people struggled to access land for growing food, especially in cities. When they could access that land, often it was polluted or they could not collect water. We had then procedural justice, so there were rules that enabled people to grow food or decided what they could grow. And people were often kind of disempowered from the possibility of changing and beginning transformation for the food system. There was then capability justice, so many people maybe wanted to, but didn't know how. So they didn't know how to grow food, how to cook, how to access land. So there is an issue of knowledge. How do we build knowledge for people, for empowerment? There were issues then of distributive justice. So maybe some community gardens would, once they manage to overcome all these barriers and to know and to grow some food, who would take that? There were, I've explored paternalistic issues of how do we fairly distribute that food? So how do we rediscover, how do we rebuild the commons where we can depend from each other and rely on each other? There were then issues of economic justice. How do we pay fairly the work of the growers? There is a community gardening movement which is largely amatorial, but what happens when you want to live on it? How do we pay fairly? And today we know the agroecological food is suffering from the competition with supermarkets that bring food that is extracted by producers on the other side of the planet. So this is a major issue of, if you want to transform the food system, we need to look into economic models for that. And finally, there was questions of global and cultural justice. So how do we enable people to feed themselves in a culturally appropriate way and consuming ethically? So we know that there is the fair movement that looks into fair trade. How can we pay food fairly? But that movement doesn't tell if the food is grown in lands that have been extracted and taken away from people. So we know that the land grabbing movement is very present. So we cannot in the context in which we are really not feeding ourselves from our own labor, we really need to look into issues of broadly global justice in connection with food. So realizing that urban agriculture was largely reproducing these injustices, I then looked into what was the movement that was really looking into issues of food sovereignty and justice for people in connection to growing food. And this was the agroecology movement. So I thought that agroecology would better represent, would be more specific on what kind of urban agriculture we were looking for. So I will come to this today. So today I'm here to talk to you about agroecological urbanism. And at the beginning, over the past years, I've been working around this area since 2017. And in the first years, I always struggled to get people to understand I was not just talking about urban agriculture. I was not talking about retrofitting food in the city, but I was really looking to develop an approach that was changing the logics, the services, and the priorities that shape the city as a whole. And this is very different from trying to create spaces here and there for growing food. Okay, I might just remove this. Okay, so I want to give here two definitions. You might know them already, but it's always good to refresh them. So agroecology is more than just ecological production of food, so it's not just organic food. Many consider this a way of life, so a way that permeates all what we do in our life, and is centered around care. So we care for all forms of life, human and non-human. So above and below ground. So we don't only care for healthy plants that look nice, but we also care for the soil and all the life in the soil that generates the life above ground. And we also care for the people. We care for the growers that are engaged in that food growing, and we want that is culturally appropriate and fairly paid. You can see here two pictures of culturally appropriate ways of growing food, for example. So milpa, probably you know about it, is a way of growing squashes, beans, and corn, and is very typical of the agroecology movement that was born in Latin America. And then the other is a polyculture, where we know that plants benefit from each other, from growing together, and we support that way of growing. The agroecological urbanism is a way of thinking how we organize the whole society in a way that is centered around agroecology. So following the principle of care and planetary health. So we think about how we design urban spaces and different functions in the city in a way that foster that. And in a way that foster the livelihoods of the farmers, because all our life depends on being fed, but also depends on caring for the soil. And the people who do that are the agroecological producers, which are never been at the core of urbanization and ways of designing and thinking about the development of the territory. So I hope that is everything clear so far. So coming to the next, so a bit of a context. So its probabilities are some of these concepts are quite dense. So I don't know if you have never heard of the metabolic rift or the knowledge rift and the epistemic rift. Is probably you need to do some reading, but I would really, really recommend you reading Schneider and McMichael paper from 2010 on the epistemic rift, because I think it has been one of those mind-blowing papers for me. And in a nutshell, we know there have been lots of discussions around the problem of urbanization in terms of metabolism. For many, many years, we have been developing cities alongside a kind of linear metabolism. So the nutrients and food and all resources come into the city. Here we process them and then they go out. And then we have been realizing this is depleting. So we need to look into more circular metabolism. What these debates have not realized is that there has been a human side of this process. People have moved out of the land. Many, many people live without really understanding how food is grown, what it takes to protect the soil and the land. So we know that there have been a process of urbanization and people live in the countryside, but these authors were also pointing out there has been a process of colonialism, the slave movements. So alongside people moving away from the land, we have also lost the knowledge. So we have forgotten. So the epistemic rift in a nutshell is the fact that we have forgotten that we have forgotten. So we don't know what we have forgotten. And so the majority of people don't know what it takes to protect the soil and the land and life on Earth. So an agroecological urbanism wants to be a way to rebuild that knowledge into our lives. Another important element of this debate has been the idea and the fact that modern urbanization, capitalist urbanization, has really evacuated food from the picture. I don't know how many of you know the Athens Charter. It was a very important moment in which architects, led by Le Corbusier, I made a manifesto of what urbanization should think about. And in that manifesto, they've been thinking around the key functions of the city, like commerce, residential areas, leisure areas, industrial areas, but never really thought about food. So food was just left out. So someone would care about that. We had colonies, we had trade relations where we could have cheap food. And so capitalist urbanization has been built around the loss of food from our concerns. So food is food from nowhere. And so in a way, what I call the food disabling city was not a contingent thing. It's been really structural. It has been part of the modern decisions of capitalist, colonial, and patriarchal neoliberal urbanization. Another element of this we have to take into account is that we have an urban growth and a metropolitanization that is ongoing. So even from UN department like UN Habitat, for example, metropolitanization and urban growth are considered unavoidable. So the emptying of the countryside is part of the picture. And I found it quite surprising and quite shocking to read that quite recently. We also have, landscape fragmentation. You can see this picture on the right, for example, patches of green and center. So this is a picture of Brussels. So these are becoming the norm. And as I'm Italian, I've seen this all over in the north of Italy. We also have, a process of land concentration. So small producers are giving up, people and farmers are aging, and big organizations buy up this land. So we have a growth of industrial farms. We also have process of soil erosion and contamination. So this graph here, you probably can't see the numbers very well, but this is saying that there is an estimation of 350,000 contaminated sites in Europe. And 100,000 or 150,000 have been identified that are not decontaminated, and a small amount that have been decontaminated. We also know that there is water erosion because of main ways of farming that are really not looking into how to protect the soil. And then we have land take. There is now a plan to have a net land take. That means we can take some agricultural land so far as it create some agricultural land somewhere else. But this idea, it really ignores the fact that it takes centuries, millennia to rebuild good soils, and destroyed soils never really return in the same way when we try to create these spaces artificially. Most of this land take is in the fragmented areas, is in the periphery of cities. So agroecology really needs to provide ways to protect those lands. And finally, the final point, and this is another big piece of work we did, was to look into policy fragmentation And the fact that we have different sectors within councils or regional governments that take decisions in silos means that many of these decisions are not taking into account the complexity of things. So farmers might have access to land, but they don't have access to housing nearby. That means it makes very difficult for them in big cities, for example, to reach out and to take care of the land properly. We know there is also the biodiversity movement is looking to protect land and often doesn't recognize that agroecology is a nature stewardship practice. Or we have cities like the case of Ghent, where they have one of the best or so prized food strategy for the city, but then they were systematically selling off public land, public farmland. So we see this kind of contradiction. So we need to have a framework where these dimensions are all addressed. And here I come to the agroecological urbanism idea. I don't know if you had the chance to explore the website. It's called www.agroecologicalurbanism.org. And we really built this as part of this project, Urbanizing in Place. And we built this with the idea to be a public resource. So this was a project we did. It was co-led by myself and Michiel de Hane from the University of Ghent. And we worked around, well, during the pandemic as well, between 2018 and 2022. And we worked across different countries to really look into what was already emerging. What were the grassroots agroecology movement doing to address the problem of urbanization? And so after many years of work on the ground and webinars as well to enlarge the conversations, we built this resource that has eight building blocks, of which you can see the names here. So each of them has got resources. So if you will explore this website, you will see case studies and various materials. And we aim to build over this with the following projects. So in a nutshell, the idea behind the agroecological urbanism is that it's a process. The 8 building blocks are 8 areas of rearticulations of social relations. So essentially, we think that we need, as a society, we need to identify ways of working in which we create resources. And so underpinning these 8 building blocks, there are 3 main values. The first one is around interrupting logical substitution, which means we stop the substitution of resources with money. So currently, you can buy anything. So land is sold for money, but there are some fundamental resources that we cannot continue to swap for money, and these are especially land. So we develop these building blocks, and you can see they're kind of organized around these 3 lines, although these principles really are underpinning all of them. So the organization here is a bit artificial. Then the second value is the value of care, as we said before. So embodying an ecology of care and more than human solidarities across everything. So we have, for example, the healthy soilscape is a building block that really looks into how to look after soil in the context of urbanization. Care is also care for people and communities, so who can eat the food and the food produced locally. So how do we organize that economically and infrastructure in society? The third value is around building resourceful community through empowering infrastructure. So rather than thinking community should be resilient, which has been declared as being resilient means you kind of bounce back. But the context in which communities are is problematic, so it's unjust. So we don't want to bounce back into a context of injustice. What we want is to create people power. Being resourceful means they have the control of those resources. So we can build those infrastructure that enable people to take choices. So these 2 building blocks are looking into how we create those resources. And the final one that you see is kind of transversal, the political pedagogies for urban agroecology is realizing that there is a gap between the rural movements, and itself the agroecological movement has been greatly rural, and the urban food justice movements. So how do we support mobilization? How do we build them, bring them together? How do we create that knowledge where farmers can start realizing the problem of urbanization on their own livelihoods? So the political pedagogies is a building block, is an area of rearticulation of the movement that is looking into how do we create knowledge across society so that we can effectively organize better. Okay, so this work that I'm now going to explain, as I said, comes from work we have done together with partners from 6 different countries. And I've organized them in a way that each building block has a first page that is looking like this. So who are the leading agents? So who we expect to lead work around this building block? A part where I explain the needs, the vision, the instruments that can be used, and some of the examples. Aware of the time, how much time I do have? Can you?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Around like 25 minutes.
Okay, all right, that's good. Yeah, so I have for each of the 8 building blocks a slide like this, and then I have some examples. And yeah, you take down any notes that and we can discuss them later. I start with the community kitchen because it's the dearest to me. So I've just come from 5 months full-time developing this European bid on the community kitchen, so let's hope that it's going well. But so the community kitchen, actually, let me go back to this. So you see, we have been discussing with research partners for quite some time. We think maybe we should reorganize the way we present these building blocks. And more we think the landed community kitchens should be at the center. In a way, we think it should be at the center because the landed community kitchen wants to be a place where we enable everyone to have access to food, and we want that food to be culturally appropriate, agroecological, locally grown, and well paid. So we know that lots of new entrant farmers really struggle to find a market, and so they are really badly paid. And on the other hand, we know that the food system is being more and more polarized. We know people that cannot afford to buy food, any kind of food, and they go to the food bank. So we think that the food system should be for everyone, and it should be sustainable. So the landed community kitchen, and there are many community kitchens out there. We know that many are just using surplus food that is available. The problem is that food is available because it's extracted from the producers. It's paid very little to people that remain poor. Nobody pays for the environmental cost of shipping into our countries. And then it is sold and then wasted because we want to always have supermarket shelves full. And therefore, there is that waste. And many people think it's a win-win. Yay, we got waste. And with that, we give it to people in need. But this is not the solution because this normalizes, enables supermarkets and big chains to still make profit. And what we want is farmers to be paid well wherever they are. So the landed community kitchens are pioneering kitchens that exist already out there that are trying to source the food from local producers, create equity models or solidarity models through which people who can pay more, people who cannot pay or pay little, and everyone can be fed. So we have got a few examples. So I currently have a project with 8 kitchens in the north of England and 1 in the south. And I've just created a network with 8 countries with more than 50 landed kitchens. And so I hope this work can go further. I made this poster with an artist a few years ago. We were trying to illustrate what could be the vision. So the vision of having a kitchen in every neighborhood where different people can cook it together, they can source this, use CSA model or various pay as you feel, and look into how, around the kitchen you could do the composting, and how that food could be culturally appropriate, and in a way you can change the food system from within and from the ground. I have various pictures of kitchens I've been visiting over the past year, and really they want to be beyond the charity models, and in the kitchen there is much more than just cooking and feeding people. The picture that you can see here is from a kitchen in a permaculture garden in Nottingham. It's a straw bale built and from 30 years ago, and it's an amazing place. So there is part of the education around permaculture, so how you can grow the food, the medicinal value of food, and then you have the space inside where you can do craft, where you can engage the people into cooking together. So the kitchen does much more than feeding people. And as part of this bid I just developed, I was looking into what are the core activities of the kitchen and what are the secondary one, in a way that we look into the infrastructural dimension, the pedagogical, the economic models, and the policy frameworks. So many of these kitchens are trying to create employment, for example. So not only people are fed, but actually they learn a new skill, or they can find employment, or they can come out of patriarchal or heteronormative approaches that have been oppressing them, and then essentially build a new community where there is a different set of values that transform their experience and their sense of belonging. So the community kitchens is a central point for all the others in a way. A second building block of the agroecological urbanism is the agroecological park. So essentially we could call this a way of looking and using zoning and planning to protect the land outside cities. Often the leading agents here are municipal actors, public sector, provinces, regions, through planning. The need is really to contrast the loss of agricultural land and the speculative prices of land, and to adopt some measures that can be there to protect that land. The vision is that planning used strategically can protect that land, at least for a longer period of time, and the creation of a so-called park is essentially a unit to organize the farm and all the various metabolic processes there, and to have municipal support around it. So 2 examples here. One is an example there from Spain, had been used quite a lot in various cities, but maybe the most organized is the one from Rosario, our research partners. They have realized that within the city, you can see they have lost land, agricultural land through development. So they started to look into how could they stop that process. So the idea was to promote sustainable living and working conditions for the producers, and they managed to protect 800 hectares of land. They had a complex set of laws to protect the land. Some of that was the ecological buffer. So they created a law where they said, well, you are a producer, you are now using pollutants, you are too close to the city, so you have 5 years to transition to agroecology or you have to stop. And then they used their members of staff to go basically nearly door to door to them to teach them how to. So this is one of the examples. Okay, so the third building blocks is the one we call farming the fragmented land. If you remember before I show you some pictures of fragmented land, this is very common. I remember when I came to Padova last, traveling from Padova to Venice, is full of fragmented pieces of agriculture. So what do you do with them? So how can you turn them from a problem to a resource? So often these are pieces of land where the traditional farmer, they use the tractor, can't do it anymore. The land becomes too small. The tractor cannot go from one area to another because there is a high-speed lane or various issues. They lost that ecosystem of support. So how can you use those lands rather than losing them, because these are the lands we are losing to development. The vision is there are many other ways of producing food that are highly productive, and they are horticultural or small animal farming, and it's very close to where people live. So you have a market nearby. And those lands can be used synergetically between different producers. So there are various examples of community orchards or the campaign for the right to grow. So I will just go through one of them or two. One is, for example, the case of the Burgert in Belgium. So it's a case in which old and abandoned orchard that was in the use in the past have been retaken by a big company in collaboration with local community. So there could be community look after the trees, then they pick some of the apples, and then the rest is taken away by the company. The community is paid a little bit, and then the company makes fruit juice out of the fruit. But there are many other examples like this of collective and common use. So there are community-supported agriculture, like CSA in Italian, that produce on rotation of marginal areas or bigger farms, or people having goats and sheep in orchards or in public parks, or there are people that put cows on green manures of other farmers. So many ways of using the same land for different communities that all benefit from using it. Another example is what's happening in the UK, where we have the Right to Grow campaign. So the Right to Grow campaign is essentially trying to tell councils, we want to use land for growing food and public land. They are not asking for big rights. What they're asking, I think, is quite minimal. So the Right to Grow that I mentioned in the paper that I showed at the beginning was far more radical than this, but that's for the first entry. So the city of Hull is the first one in the UK who has accept to be part of the Right to Grow movement and to give community access to public land for growing food. How this is going, we don't know yet. But it would be interesting to see if this could be connected to various community kitchens, for example. So you have little producers that produce for themselves and then also get some money maybe out of it. The productive housing estate is another building block, and is essentially looking into how can we bring production close to the cities, close to where people live, be this both farmers or just everyone. So there have been examples of how to include food growing into the housing neighborhoods or houses through design. But there have also been movements that were looking into how to support the farmers. So you might know, I hope you know, the Garden City movement. So the Garden City movement, I think it was interesting because Ebenezer Howard's original idea of settlement would be that the city, land, and buildings are owned by the residents. And it was a network of cities. But there would be a core with the garden and all the cultural facilities. There would be another big park, and there would be residential areas. All the houses had shared kitchens that then, unfortunately, if you go to Letchworth, which was the first city that he tried to build, all the houses have divided up the kitchens. But the idea that cooking is something you do together. Then each house had a bit of allotment behind where it would grow food, and then there would be farmland that they would also own. So it was crucial to really have food production in the housing estate because everyone could be involved at different scales. Unfortunately, the Garden City movement has been very strong, but the food element hasn't been there. And then another example of what's happening on this context is the people's land policy, and where the farmers have been really looking into how can rewrite a land reform policy, and also including access to housing. Or the example of Brighton. Brighton, back in I think the first time they did it was 2011. They developed a policy basically essentially saying, if you are a developer and you want to make a proposal for a building, you need to include a space for food growing. It's not compulsory, but if you include it, we might value it more positively. And that was another example where you can use mild ways through policy to support the engagement with the ideas that you are putting forward. We have then the land and market access incubator. This is, in some contexts, this could be the same as the agroecological park or very much integrated. Surely in a case like Rosario, where they have been developing agroecology as a public policy for many years. Essentially, the focus here is to support economic models. It's quite important because if you consider many new farmers in urban context, they don't come from farming background. So the peasant schools or the schools that exist to support farmers in training, they tend to have outdated models, rural models. So they don't really work for new farming entrant farmers. And often they need to find a place where they can test these economic models. So the municipalities can support the startup because they have land and they also have facilities. So the land and market access incubator wants to be a way to encourage all cities to have one of those test spaces. So in Argentina, they put agroecology at the center. So as I was saying before, they had all sorts of policies, but also they had, for example, a municipal seed bank, so that the farmer wouldn't have to struggle to find good seeds that were saved in that particular climate. There were a range of different municipal areas where farmers could start up and support their business. And then they would have facilitated access to markets, for example. So they have stalls for free or at a very low price compared to conventional farmers. Sorry, that's just a page from the website. One of maybe the most interesting has been the case of Brussels. The Brussels Paysan pilot project was essentially a local government together with the regional government. They identified a piece of land where there were already some buildings, and they called this a space test, so a kind of test space. So you are a farmer with an idea, I don't know, growing certain foods to make jam and other transformed food. You could go there, like test, you would be given a certain polytunnel to grow and access to those facilities. And then you could develop your business, try it out, and you would have a number of organizations there to support you in developing this. For example, the Zarico offer supports with various networks. Then you can access like a veggie box, you can access community kitchens, and also there is an organization helping you to find land after you go out of this incubator. And that's been a very successful, so it's really a stunning project. Another approach is the one developed in Spain by the network of agroecological cities. So essentially, this was a voluntary organization who started to support a network of cities that were interested in agroecology. This started at the time where the agroecology movement was involved in taking over the municipality in Spain. So it was like lots of enthusiasm about taking over power and supporting agroecology. So here you will see that they started to organize monthly meetings with certain delegates from the cities. They provide support, education. So I've been involved, for example, in a few seminars with them. And they supported municipalities in developing different kind of initiatives there to support startup and economic development. And this is ongoing, so it's another interesting case. The healthy soilscape is another building block. I think we are nearly there. Got 3 more left. So healthy soilscapes looks into soil fertility. So you might know, healthy soils are essential for growing food, but many startup gardens or enterprises are starting, especially if they are in cities, on less than optimal soils. When farmers are isolated, they also struggle. Like if you are an horticultural business, you don't have the manure to support soil fertility. So unless you are part of a network, you end up essentially having to rely on chemical fertilizers. So the healthy soilscape is a building block that looks into different initiatives to increase knowledge around agroecology's approaches to soil health, but also to create and organize different networks through which you can access fertility inputs. So in Argentina, they have the municipality has been coordinating this through, for example, bringing all the leaves and the grass mowing that come from public parks to the farmers, that then they compost it. Or they have been supporting the use of brewery spent grains. Beer comes from, you use barley. So all those fermented material that you don't use anymore, you can then compost it. Or also supporting the poultry industry to connect to the agroecological producers. And that's a way to organize let's say, the circular metabolism. Another interesting initiative is the one in London from this groups called roving microscopes. And they were essentially bringing a microscope around the allotments in the city to get people to see the life in the soil, the vitality. So they were in incredible groups. And yeah, so this is another way, like how do we get people to know that soils are alive, and how do people exchange nutrients between soil and plants? So all the mycorrhizal and all the life and small organisms that enable that exchange between plants and soil. So it's like something you can learn and see. So the Territorial Food Hub, in a way, gets very close to the idea of the landed community kitchen. It's a physical space in the neighborhood, kind of catalyzing for the identities in the community. So it's a place that can offer like micro entrepreneurship opportunities. There can be a cafe, so consumers are there. There could be different services, like from the seed bank that we've seen in Argentina, or a meeting point to involve the community in debates about what kind of food they want. So this is really a place that looks into the merging. How do we bring together those communities? How do we support people in need to see where the food come from, or to be engaged and to be retrained into a new job? So you can see this is the space, like the Wolf's Lane in London is, maybe you can see better in the next. So it's a site with lots of greenhouses and a few buildings and some space for growing food outside. And they have like greenhouses. This is the kind of space that connects all those greenhouses, where the community has a cafe. They had like a participatory process to understand what kind of food people wanted. And then they have the greenhouses that used to grow culturally appropriate crops that wouldn't grow outside. And it's just an amazing, it's really a hub of the food movement in London. And this is an example to see, you can bring the people there to decide what, to give opportunities for them to reshape essentially the food system. And I would imagine this to be something similar to some of the community kitchens. And actually, some of the people that are involved here are involved in one of the most consolidated landed community kitchens that I know. And the final one is, the final building block is so-called political pedagogies for urban agroecology. So it's really how to build the movement, how to build the knowledge So the needs are the needs of peasant schools that can address the knowledge needed for farming in urban conditions, is looking into strategic political capacities and really overcoming that divide between urban and rural. So the vision is that is the political movement and take forward the lobbying for policies, for example. I had developed with an artist and a research assistant that was part of that movement. We have developed a poster to show the principles that were emerging from the agroecological actors that we have interviewed there. And some of those principles for that political work were around slowness for building territories, the idea of resourcing care, created decolonial anti-racist movement, the multiplicity of learning practices, so like accepting that there is neurodiversity. There are many ways, many types of knowledge that are important and many different ways of learning, which are not necessarily, sitting in a class like you are doing, but more practice-based, solidarity-based learning. And also we were looking into the importance of crossover organizations, like big umbrella organizations that maybe have been the pioneer in the movement, and they had the resource to support small other organizations to emerge. And so we found out that in various contexts, we have identified those organizations and they were aware of the political role that they had in transforming and bringing forward urban agroecology. See if there was something else here. So these were like taken from the website in this area. Yeah, so another point that were emerging, Harry was saying that care is the thing that gets lost when you are under-resourced. So we tend to forget about care, we tend to forget about diversity and how to support that diversity. So it's very important, even within the movement for urban agroecology, to really think, how can you put care at the center of what you're doing? Don't forget the key principle of agroecology. And this is like, there is a website, the Urban Food Justice blog that I've developed with some of my works there. This is the link to the website with the building blocks and emails if you want to get in touch with me, and some resources. And that's it. Let's see if I can stop sharing. There.
Thank you, Chiara, for this interesting speech. I don't know if you listened the claps here in the...
I've just seen it though, don't worry.
Okay, perfect, very well. And thank you. Before starting with the question, I only want, because you mentioned Padova. You mentioned that you visit Padova, and so you saw the situation here in Padova. So because these students will spend like 3 months at least in Padova, only to, and this is your material, only to know, well, you know this because we present a lot of aspect of Padua as land surface temperature, the 50% of soil sealed and so on. And this is the rent and the sale of houses in Padua, the cost of the houses in Padua. These are all obstacles. But we have also the other 50% of free space, I mean, in Padua, that this is shown in the map. I don't know if you know that the 55% is agricultural areas. So we have maybe in mainly in the yes, in the neighborhoods in the around the city center, we have a lot of agricultural areas.
Yeah.
Unluckily, our agricultural areas, as you can see, are most cereals and industrial products. So as you can see here, this is, I want to show you another picture of Padua. That is this, in red is all the sealed areas, so all the buildings mainly.
Yeah.
And in the other color are the agricultural areas in Padua, where you can see in orange all the area, the 95% of area for cereals and industrial crops.
Yeah.
So this is a typical situation, I think, of a typical city in Europe or in the north of Italy, in the Pianura Hill, in the Pianura floodplain. So, but we have also some good basis for to improve agroecology here in Padua, because, for example, we have 19 municipal gardens with 710 lots. We have cycle paths to reach this area. We have also an agro park in the south, the Bassi Zonzo agroecological park in the south of Padua. So we have some natural capital that could support the transition to a real agroecological city.
So the municipal gardens are the allotments, the orti urbani?
Yes, orti urbani. We have 19 nucleus with 710 lots. Each nucleus has 30 square meters.
It's a lot for Italy. Yeah.
Yes.
To give you an idea, a city like Coventry has 250,000 inhabitants, has got 3,000 plots.
8,000. Wow.
3,000 for individual plots. So yeah,
very interesting.
But that's a tradition. In the UK, you had
These are municipal urban gardens. So the municipality of Padua give to people they make a contract with people to for 5 years and then renewable to manage these lots. And also only some project initiative that that we have in our municipality. So I would like also to focus on the grassroots movements, because, for example, yesterday we visit Circolo Wigwam, but there are a lot of other solidarity purchasing groups in Padua, and there is also, I think I would like to present this association that is Cucina Brigante, that is a food rescue organization that is very interesting, and they are very active. So maybe if you want to join this Cucina Brigante, I think that I can give you the contact of the person. And there are also other example of projects. Even if, as you can see, for example, the municipal food policies project, this is now they are trying to create a food policy for Padua, has no budget. Okay, so no budget. The municipal green plan that have a very interesting agricultural chapter is not mandatory. So there are some projects and initiatives, but yes, they are at the beginning. So we hope that we can include also agroecology and in our city. And okay, only to put all the topic that Chiara mentioned in her speech in Padua, in the context of Padua. Now I leave the floor to the question, please, the question with the microphone. So okay. And in case I have tons of questions, so don't worry, Chiara, because we have a lot of students that
I'm aware I was talking really fast, but it's so hard to speak of all of this in
So I give now, I don't want, if you want to collect 2 or 3 questions and answer, maybe better for you.
It doesn't matter. We can see how I can write notes.
So we can collect 2 or 3 questions and then Chiara answer, then another 2 or 3 questions. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Tornaghi, for your presentation. I was wondering if, based on the size and density of a city or an urban area, like if and how like the methods of agroecological urbanism change to like account for the size.
So,
yes, Chiara?
No, I was trying to understand better the question. So if I can say, based on the size and density of the city, what are the changes that needs to happen?
Yes, exactly. Just taking into account that there's cities like for example, in Asia that have less space, like green space versus in Europe. So just the geographical differences.
Yeah.
Another question? Yeah.
I actually have two questions. So the first one is, I feel like all of what you said is very global north centric, and I don't see this happening. I see that this is going to be very difficult to scale up in the global south, where even cities struggle with hunger, with famine, with food insecurity, and so on. So I wanted to know like your context about this, because a lot of us here, most of us come from global south countries, and I don't see how this can feed like people when we have, as I said, like food insecurity and so on. And then the other question I have is also about global south. So I have another activist, a colleague from Somalia, and she's telling me that even when you mentioned capitalism, but I also just wanted to add like one more layer to that, is humanitarian aid. So in her country, and this is also something that is also happening in my own country. I'm from Morocco. Humanitarian aid, specifically food aid, is pumped into all of these countries and is making farmers less wanting to engage in any agriculture, because there's all of this food that is pumped, like all of these non-native species and so on, that are pumped in their country every single year. And so this is technically not capitalism, but I wanted to know if this is something that you've kind of addressed in agroecology in general. So this concept of like foreign aid, food aid, and so on, and dependency of food like on other countries. So I think that was a very long question, but.
Thank you. Another one, then I leave you the floor.
Thank you very much for your presentation. I have two questions. The first one, as all like initiatives are mostly provided by private circles, is there any help from municipality? And the second question, is there any like activist representation in maybe authority or municipality? May they also impact on policy? Thank you.
So I leave you the floor for the first round. Thank you, Chiara.
Okay. Right. So let's start from the first. So in a way, like I'm not claiming so that urban agriculture should feed the city. Yeah. So what these building blocks are essentially to say, let's reconnect the city dynamics with the food growers. Regardless the size of the city, you still have a city consuming food, and you still have areas where you can grow food. Of course, I have been in South America, I've been to Brazil, I've been to Argentina, and I've seen when you are in a city like Rio, where you don't see much green. But I've been in São Paulo, and I've seen the movement for urban agriculture, well, I say urban agroecology there is huge. So even in very big cities, you can see that from small, the amount of products that you can have in small spaces is huge. And as well, the knowledge. So as the more you connect people with the production of food, the more you start caring for it. So when I'm saying like these building blocks are, and I come to the second questions about my work being very global north, is actually not, in the sense that the main partner in our project was Argentina. Of course, Argentina is more developed than other places, but it's very much global south. And they were a group of activists that entered in the system in Argentina during the crisis, the financial crisis of 2002 and before. And they have been squatting land and growing food and showing and connecting with the diaspora agroecology community that was coming there, migrants that were escaping from other countries. And from there, they show how you can feed the city with good food from parks when is needed. And then from there, they institutionalized an office within the municipality. So I would say I speak for the global north in the sense that I try to make the changes in Europe in the cities I work with, but I very much learn from what happened in the global south. And if anything, what I've realized is that there is a mismatch between the salaries that we can expect today and the cost of food. So we live in global north cities where food is extremely cheap because it's dumped here, as well as in other places. And making a living into farming, it doesn't really pay the rent. So if you want, I could say it's the other way around, that my work is too much rooted in the global south to be able to bring this work to say, how could a farmer today in Padova grow food, sell it in a city, given how much you expect to pay for food, and make a living, a decent living? So I would say that I think that if you want, we really need to pay the food more for what it costs. And maybe some of that needs to be subsidized. Or maybe you should decommodify food completely, subsidizing the work of farmers to make this possible. And going back to the first question about size, to me, the building blocks are really looking into infrastructure that we need to have. Whether the city is big or small, you need to have an infrastructure where you engage people with food, where you enable people who can't eat to eat good food, to support market access for farmers. I might skip some of the questions, but return to that. And there was a question around the role of, or the last two questions, I think they were kind of similar, about what's the role of the municipality. In the cases I've shown, let's say half and half were municipality driven. So the example in Brussels, where they created this incubator, that was a municipality who used public land, decided to support new farmers because they said, well, in Europe, we are losing our farmers because most farmers are old. They are already at retirement age. They continue because they love their job, but the children of farmers don't want to become farmers. Because if, I did look at the statistic in just a few years, so it's not totally updated, but let's say 10 years ago, the salary of a farmer or farm worker was about £400. Let's say 550 euro for, for a month of work. Who wants to do this job when you have access to universities? So we are losing farmers, and in the next decades, most of the farmers will be gone. So who's taking this work? So some countries and some municipalities have taken this question more seriously than others. So Belgium is one of the places. And so the municipality of Brussels said, well, we want to support new farmers. So this incubator, the Borrel Brussels Paysan I was showing, it is municipality driven in collaboration with the food movements, because they said, well, we got land and resources, we can pay 1 or 2 people from the municipality that manage this space. But we know that the food movement, the agroecology movement is mostly grassroots. So they have teamed up with the organizations that are supporting markets to find more land, to connect with the consumers from the community-supported agriculture movement. So that is a very much example of municipality-driven. The zoning, the agroecological park, is all municipality-driven in the sense that they have control of food zoning. So there are some cities that use that power well. So mostly Spain, because it's the first place in Europe where the agroecology has come like 20 years ago. So even if it is low, they are kind of far ahead in terms of looking at the use of those municipal tools. Some of the kitchens I discovered just recently are municipally driven, for example, in France. So it's not, I try to, for each of the slides, to show who are the agents. So for some, the agents are public, for some others are grassroots, but it's very much a mix. And also, looking at the Argentinians, they were a group of activists who then found place into the municipality, very much like is happening there in Padova. So I think that's great. Who is the public? The public is us. If you stop thinking about people in the municipality as being just the bureaucrats, they are also people with values. So there is a lot that can be done by lobbying and creating and engaging in conversations to bring forward change. There was a question about capitalism and humanitarian aid. I completely agree, where we know that is very much a problem. In Argentina themselves, we have been to see, well, that's not exactly food dumping, but we have been seeing where big multinational, they grow soy, transgenic soy, we're there to see the way food was grown. We know that there are international trade that is just there to dump and food essentially in food producing places. That's the story of the food bank and the International Monetary Fund. That also needs to change, but it's just us engaging in that. And I think La Via Campesina has been fighting that. And I mean, at the moment where we are speaking, there are thousands of people in Sri Lanka at an Ileni movement that is the movement for food sovereignty and agroecology. And that's led by thousands of farmers that have been organizing themselves to stop dumping, to build food sovereignty in all countries. And that's a long and hard work because multinationals got lots of power and they, are supported by this trade. At the same time, the farmers are people like us. So I think that political organization is essential. So any more questions? I think I have answered the question the best I could, but let me know if you have other
Don't worry, this public's not shy. Don't worry, because we have, I think we stay here till tonight. Okay, I start with other 3 questions. Chiara?
Hello, thank you so much for the presentation. I'm curious to know more about the aspect of funding, especially behind the community kitchens. You've mentioned São Paulo, and I'm sure you know about the landless workers movement, which is very strong in Brazil. And one of their main projects are solidarity kitchens. And they work very well, but they have a problem that it is that they work under the charity model logic. So they rely a lot on citizen donations. And that makes the project very susceptible to economical fluctuations and all of that, and it's very vulnerable. So I wanted to know more about the funding for the examples that you showed.
Okay.
Thank you. Another one here.
Yeah, thank you for your presentation. I was very interested about what you said about making food culturally appropriate in agroecology, because I was thinking in the countries you're working in, Belgian chocolate is a very big thing, and that's sort of an ecosystem, or I guess a supply chain based on colonialism. Obviously, tea in England is another example, and then I was also thinking coffee in Italy. These are all things that are ingrained in the cultures of these places, but we couldn't do that through an ecological system, I think.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you. Another one here.
Thank you. I was particularly curious to understand if you have assessed or maybe plan to assess any relation between these agroecological parks and the water availability in major cities, for example, because I think it could be a challenge in some particular places, for example, the great desertic cities or others like that.
Okay.
I leave the
So
floor.
you're asking if I had consideration about water and agroecology?
Yeah, exactly. Or maybe plan to assess that relation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay.
Please, I leave the floor to you, and then another round.
Okay. So I start from the last one then. So water availability in agroecology. So agroecology is trying to grow, to think what did the ancestors do here? So as you know, if you look at the shape of buildings, we started to make lots of buildings, lots of windows. But in the past, in places where it was very hot, like in Italy, you wouldn't have all those windows because it just makes a greenhouse, right? So similarly, in the past, people would grow plants that used to grow there. So really looking and discovering ancient seeds is an important part of agroecology because many plants are adapted to the climate. So they don't need as much water. So I was in touch with Palestinians that some times ago, they were looking into, all the Palestinian has been done by Israeli agriculture, but they had lots of traditional seeds that were really resistant to droughts. So it's important to look into how do we rediscover, how do we reselect the species that thrive well here. So in terms of water, this is one element. But in agroecology, resource conservation is central. So there is not just this, but it's looking into how to design an agroecosystem in a way that is resource conserving as much as possible. So that's also why I think in Italy there should be big debates around, all the north is growing rice and corn that is really water intensive, and this is something you can't do anymore in the summer. So how do we reflect on how our diets also have to change? From this, and then I come to the cultural appropriate diets that you were asking. You really touch a point, and I think that there should be far more debate in terms of what does it mean to be culturally appropriate, given that, I mean, all the Italian diet, if you look, or what we think is the Italian diet, even the traditional original one, polenta, in the corn-based food, that all of that didn't exist 500 years ago. So I think that is part of the debate we should start to have. But when we talk about culturally appropriate food, we tend to refer to the fact that many people who cannot buy food, they go to the food bank and they are given whatever is available there. So the terms of cultural appropriate started to reflect there when we think about what is the food that we are offering, where many people that are in poverty are migrants, are not eating maybe what we are used to when we think we're doing good to give some food. So there are many projects that have started to look into this. In London, where there are lots of migrants, there is a black movement, for example, is looking into how can we design a system where we grow what we can, and there are lots of, let's say, exotic crops. Like as an Italian in England, I grow globe artichokes. It's impossible to find at the market. Would you believe that? Globe artichokes, certain types of, borlotti beans, and these are considered exotic and they grow very well there. So similarly, there are lots of crops that are culturally specific and nobody would think about growing. So the black movement there is looking into how can we adapt the crops to what people like to eat, and how can we import, because we are not talking about self-sufficiency. We are saying we want to have a just food system. So we are never going to grow coffee beans or, cocoa plants. But we can import from cooperatives that control what they do, they control the land. So there is a big movement in terms of how can we develop sustainable food chains and trade in a way that pays fairly. So I know a kitchen in London, and for example, they import for cooperative of women's in North Africa. But I know there are also trades across, the Americas for coffee, and there are, movements in Mexico. They've also been looking into, the fair trade. But it's not just the fair trade that we know is not just about paying. The fair trade of the agroecology movement is about land and control and food sovereignty more deeply. What plants do you grow? What choice do you have on the seeds? Do you own the land? Do you own the business? So it's a bit deeper. And then coming to the kitchens, funding examples. Okay, again, starting from London, Granville Community Kitchen. That has been started by a group of women. They were homeschooling their kids. They are very much involved in the agroecology movement. So that is a kitchen that has also a farm. So they started, well, the model is a solidarity model. And what they say is, we want people that buy our veggie box and become a member to basically invest in the political project of the kitchen. So you choose how much you pay. So there will be 3 or 4 pay levels. So you could say this veggie box, you could pay €2 €5, €10 or 15, you choose. We don't check how rich you are, you choose. And this is what we do. This is the kitchen. They try to create employment, to pay a farmer decently, to do political education in the neighborhood, to work in schools. So it's amazing what they try to do. And you choose how much to pay, and knowing that if you pay above the cost of the food, you support not just the subsidizing of a box to someone else, but you support the whole political work of the kitchen. So this is a solidarity model. There are other kitchens. The one in France are entirely funded by the municipality. And I mean, there are some issues there, but what they did was to create a food hall. So there are lots of producers and restaurants that they sell there. And then with the profit that the municipality takes, they completely subsidize a community kitchen run by a community. So there are other models there, except, you know, a mix of funding, a mix of pay as you feel. Some people started to say, pay as you feel, but pay at least £1. And then I realized that as soon as I said, pay at least £1, people would pay at least 5, and or most of the people. So they started to think that we have got choice. We don't always have to go and pay the little. And when you see the benefits are multiple, because we feel people are happy, people are, you know, the benefits are in rewards for care and to see a thriving community. So I think there is a lot. The research project I'm trying to develop has got 4 thematic lines, and one of this is really around a business model. The business model is the weak part of the story, because obviously paying farmer properly means paying far more than what we would normally pay the vegetables. But we also think that there are lots of resources out there in the community. Like a kitchen needs storage space if they want to be able to get food for the whole year. They need a fridge. There are examples in Finland, they're trying to use a time bank to pay for the food. So you offer different skills into the time bank. Like you can teach English, for example, and you put 2 hours of teaching into the time bank, and then you can get 2 hours of something else, or food in return. So looking into what economy models do we need? That's the thing. How can we build solidarity and exchange around food and farming? So I think it's a big question. We still don't have yet kitchens that are totally independent and they do all what they do, but there is a lot happening there.
Chiara, we have very few times, so I will leave time for other 2 questions, more or less. Okay.
Yeah. And just one thing, I wanted to say one thing about the Brazilians. So I've been to São Paulo. The kitchens were closed because that was the day where the landless movement were doing the urban festivals. So I couldn't visit them any, but I've been speaking with people. So what they are doing is not just solidarity in the sense that the municipality has decided to pay the small agroecological producers. So they are paid, and the agroecology movement is there, the landless movement, have been really understanding that they need to invest in the context of the urban to get the urban population to understand what they do. That's why they open the kitchens there. And that is a pivotal element of their political strategy. So that's fascinating.
Thank you. Okay, as in Padua, we have a bike kitchen where you can fix your own bike or buy a used bike and fix it and with offers. So, okay, I leave the floor.
Good morning. Thank you for your presentation. My question is, are there any evidences about the impact of urban agroecological approach in terms of human health, such as the reduction of number of diseases or deaths related, related of the hunger, for example? Thank you.
Thank you. The other last 2 questions.
Hi, Chiara. I'm Argentinian, and I'm from the city of Mendoza, and I was really interested in the case study that you brought up with Rosario, especially because in the context of other provinces, there's no municipal support because of the like neoliberal control of our municipalities and governments. And so I was interested in like, what do you think are, you know, ways to integrate these agroecological like principles in cities that don't have municipal support, especially in the context of Argentina?
Okay.
There is another one question, no? No? Okay, here, one moment.
Hi, thank you. I was wondering if you see a common ground for these practices such as polyculture, regenerative ecology, agriculture to be integrated in a large scale, also for industrial production. Is there like a way that this knowledge can be transferred and adopted, such as incentives, economic incentives? Thank you.
Okay. Maybe I start now? Okay, I come from the last one again. So the first question we should ask is, why do we want to adapt this to the industrial? In the sense that we know agroecology is human intensive, but we also believe that there is a value in being connected to the land. I don't know if any of you have been growing food, but if you haven't, I would really recommend you that you start, because once you start, you realize the benefits it has on you and your mental health and all your body, and it's something you don't want to give up. So I don't know if I really want to engage with the question of how to turn agroecology for industry, because the whole industrial model is that you are disconnected from the land. You got two workers for a massive amount of land. You don't connect with the plants. You don't put your hands in the soil. We have the regenerative movement that has been really speaking to the industry, and is really, there is no people there. There is just say, oh yeah, we need to take care of the soil. And so there are many conventional farmers now grow green manures as intercropping to improve the fertility. But I believe that the future is we are all engaged in food production. Also because we have to realize we've got a growing population. So population grows, and we can't continue to think, oh, we're going to stuck people in cities, and so we protect the land outside without people. The reason why the movement for agroecology is largely urban in Europe is because there are people like you who live in city, who like going to the concert, who like going to have a drink, but they are interested in food. How many of you want to go to live in the countryside and be a farmer? So I think that the future is to imagine people being engaged in growing food and having the cultural life that they want. At the same time, we cannot just think we're going to build on all the land and let's forget about food, but really think, how can we have a thriving agriculture that is people intensive and love intensive? Then going to the Argentinian question. So well, I know that Rosario is a very particular case, has been probably the only left-wing post remaining in the account. That was the place that gave birth to Che Guevara, for a context. When I was in Argentina, there was a big movement for the right of women to abortion. And that was the only province where that was supported, when there was a movement for that and where it was legal. I don't really know what I can say, so how to bring agroecology in other countries where you have right-wing populism. But the way it happened in Rosario was that the activists started to show what was possible at the time when there was need. So never forget the importance of a crisis for change. Show what you can do and gain people's trust. So I would say that is what you need to do. So build a movement for people. What they do in Argentina, in Rosario, to maintain that awareness is to have lots of festivals, give lots of voice to the farmers. So they brought the farmers to universities. So I think they're really doing what they call the extensione inversa. They really brought the farmers into the university where agroecology wasn't known, and do really be true to their values. And it's a long trajectory. But I think that because the crisis has been there, and I think with the all warmongering that we have got around now, I don't know if you have realized, there is so much, it's like pre-Second World War in terms of trade, for example. So I think that the crisis is so close and is already so present that really showing how you can do alternatives is important. Make cases and showcase them. Then evidence on impact of urban agroecology approach in human health. So I don't know of studies on this. Well, I know of a book that was edited by a former colleague of mine. I need to see where it is. Maybe I put it downstairs. I can send you the reference, but I wrote a chapter there around medicinal agroecology. And I have a circle of women where we meet in my kitchen, we go foraging together, and we are trying to rediscover the medicinal power of food. And I come from being sick and not finding the answer in the mainstream medicinal approach. And I found that through Chinese medicine and foraging and keeping wild plants in my diet every day, it really made a massive difference. And I'm not saying don't go to the doctor for major things, but I'm saying there is so much. People were healthy because we evolved by nibbling plants in prairie and woodlands for millennia. That is not there, is not often even in agroecological food. I mean, there is more, even more, like really taste the plants around you. So I would say there is more and more to discover about health and agroecology. And we know from many populations that had wild plants in their diet that they are much healthier. I can send you the references. I've got a couple, but I don't have on top of my head.
What can I say? Thank you, and please clap for Chiara.
Thank you.
And yes, as you know, you have the presentation of Chiara with all the email and so on. So you can, if you have other questions, I think Chiara is possible for the students to write you.
Absolutely, absolutely. You can also come and visit, and yeah.
Yes, this could be another idea to visit in Coventry. Okay. And okay, have a good lunch. Luckily, without agroecological food, I think in the in the university we have not agroecological food, but we will try to improve this part also in our university. Thank you, Chiara.
Thank you so much,
Thank
and
you.
thank you for your questions. I love them.
Thank you.
Bye. Bye. Bye.
Bye, bye, Chiara. Thank you.
Bye.
Grazie mille.